Welcome to the DNA show.
DNA? Dude, are we doing a science show?
No, D is for Dennis.
Oh, A is for Andy.
And N is for and?
Oh, man, nerds.
Oh, yeah.
We're nerds, dude.
Yeah. Well, good. Then we can talk about comics and movies and pop culture and sports.
Sports and nerds. Yeah, we're going to make that work.
All right, let's roll.
Heidi-ho, welcome back to another fantastic, thrilling, exciting episode of the Dennis and Andy Show. I'm Andy.
And I'm Dennis. Welcome back.
And we're starting off talking about a comic book series that just wrapped with its latest issue. It was a 6-issue miniseries. It was put out by DC's Black Label imprint. The sub-imprint, I guess you would say, is Joe Hill Presents Hill House Comics. For those that don't know, Joe Hill is a pen name. He is Stephen King's son. You knew that, right, Dennis?
Yep, I did.
Yeah. I actually don't know his real name.
Stephen King's son.
He's Stephen King's... Joe Hill's his pen name, though, because his last name is King. Anyhow, he has his own sub-imprint at DC Comics called Hill House Comics, and it's a line of horror. I always have such a horror comic books.
Horror.
Scary stuff. It's the scary stuff. And I like that stuff. The one that I was really excited for, and once again, I'm the art guy. Dennis is more the writing guy. And the two of us, I'm the art guy because I draw comics for a living. I was really excited when I saw Stuart Immonen teaming up with Joe Hill on a book called Plunge. For those that don't know, Stuart Immonen got his start in the early 90s, I believe at DC. He worked on Legion of Superheroes, Superman. He wrote some Superman. Before Plunge, he was a mainstay Marvel guy. He did all new X-Men. He started off as the artist on that book for, I think, 20 issues or so. Worked on New Avengers. Ton of stuff at Marvel. Worked on a creator-owned book with Mark Millar, that is, at Image called Empress. So I've always been a big fan of Stuart's work. You like Stuart's work?
Yeah. Yep. And I was pretty... let's see, I wasn't excited about this title because Andy said, hey, there's this title I started picking up, and I was like, it's not superhero. I'm like, I don't know if we want it.
Dennis is getting farther away as I go with the description of it until he read it.
Yep, and then he goes, well, just take my issues and read it. I did. Wound up having to go buy them. And it's very captivating. So, Andy, just give us a brief synopsis of Plunge.
Plunge. It's a horror book, like I said, written by Joe Hill, drawn by Stuart Immonen, and colors by the fantastic Dave Stewart. So, basically, a distress signal goes out from a ghost ship that was lost 40 years ago. And the salvage team is hired to go find it. It's the Carpenter Salvage Team. It's 3 brothers, and they're accompanied by a marine biologist, female marine biologist, who's eager to retrieve lost data, and a company man looking to protect information and assets. And they're sent to recover what remains of the Derleth. That's the name of the vessel that they're now getting this signal from 40 years ago.
And it's automated signal now, right?
Yeah, it's an automated signal now.
That just started appearing.
Yep, just for some reason, just started pinging. When the ping comes through, the people that get it are like, well, that can't be. That thing's been missing since 1983. What? Nah, something's got to be wrong. So, it starts off really intriguing. And this is one of the few things, we do spoil a lot of stuff when we talk about movies and things on the show. And, we try not to with the movies that came out a few years back because we figure, you know what, it's been a few years, too bad. This literally just wrapped, so we're not going to spoil a lot. We're just going to, my 2 cents is I'm a straight up superhero guy when it comes to the comics I read. I don't stray too much out of that genre, but I did with this. because of the art. I haven't read any other comics by Joe Hill, so this was the first one I've read. Have you read anything by Joe Hill?
No. And we keep talking about what are we going to do? Should I pick something up, give it a shot? I don't know. I do more comics than I do anything right now, and that's why novels and stuff, short stories. Yeah, I'm pretty much graphic novels, treasury editions, comics. That. Well, then when you kind of mention that, I'm like, well, I do like the genre, and I picked up the first one. I'm like, oh. So it's your typical, because I do like movies, Jaws, the deep sea ones, the 47 meters below, anything like that.
Oh, yeah. I love
Shark Week.
Sharks. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So that kind of pulled me in, too, just because of the story dealing with a ship that's been missing for so long. And it deals with, I don't even want to get into. There's creatures. That's as much as I'm going to say about the threat, because I don't want to spoil anything.
All they do is they go out and they find the ship. So they park it. They find it. They see the wreckage. They basically have a smaller craft which they take over in order to start doing the salvage.
Right.
So which is pretty funny because. The special projects guy is the corporate guy, and whenever you hear corporate in these, we always kind of think of the sleazy guy. He's not telling you the truth. Well, if you find this over there, this is still our property. So immediately we just start thinking, boy,
there's ulterior motive.
Oh wait, which there almost always is.
Always is. I mean, that's a good point, because the one thing about this, and even with the ending of it. One of the things I told Dennis before he read it was it reads like a movie.
Exactly.
And part of that's because of Joe Hill's writing, and part of it is because of Stuart's artwork, because he's a great storyteller. His art is definitely on the more realistic side of style in comics. It's not cartoony and stuff. It's definitely more realistic, to the point of the corporate guy in this. Later on, we're going to cast this if it was a movie, which I actually hope it does become a movie. The corporate guy, as soon as I saw Stuart's portrayal and design of this character, I thought, my God, that's got to be Paul Giamatti. It's got to be.
Which is really funny, because Andy and I didn't talk about this at all. I mean, this was something we came up with after I wound up reading it, and I went down to the comic shop on Wednesday and grabbed it so I could sit there and read it Wednesday night. Yeah. So I sat there and read it. But the entire time when I was reading him, I'm like, oh, it's like totally sounds like, feels like, looks like Paul Giamatti. Yeah. All they do is throw glasses on him, and I'd swear that's who they modeled him after.
Even the clothes are kind of like bigger looking. You know what I mean?
Yes, and he's shorter, and he's the shorter
guy. One. Yeah, so there's that.
But the one thing I noticed is this, like Andy said, it reads like a movie. And that's what really intrigued me about it, because his art style is really good. Like the boat, the tug that's going over there. I mean, I've seen a lot of tugs because I've done a lot of watercraft. I mean, it looks just like it. I mean, he drew very, very precise. I love the art style in it. The writing was very well done. I was never bored with this. So I thought for sure maybe after a while I would get bored, and I never was. It captivated me the entire time.
Well, and you've got the male lead, which is the captain of the ship, right? Yeah. And what's his name again?
So the captain his first name's Gage, and it's Carpenter. So the three Carpenter brothers. But the Carpenters, and he's the big. He's big guy.
He's a big dude. He's got a beard. He's just what you would imagine in this role. He towers over David Lacombe, who is the corporate stooge that basically hires him. I mean, the captain just towers over this dude.
And the captain's level-headed. He's smart. He's experienced. He's just a likable character. And when he tells the crew, well, this is what we're going to do, the crew don't second-guess him. They don't really all have turns, because he's he just knows what he's
and
doing.
the crew are two of his younger brothers.
Right.
His two brothers, who are definitely smaller in stature,
So his little brother, it's Clark and Russell are the two brothers, or the three Carpenter brothers. So, and what was interesting, again, at the beginning, when they were like, why aren't you hiring for this salvage a big company?
Right.
Or
Which is a tip-off.
one of these 401s, because they're like, that usually tells me that everybody else has turned you down when you start looking at an organization like mine. Well, yeah, then it kind of comes forward that, there's stuff on board and they don't necessarily like where it's sitting or where they find it or what could be on it, but they pay him a lot of money and he's like, well, do we take this? Yeah, we're going to go ahead and take it.
Well, it's also in Russian water.
Right.
Too. The ship they have to find, or boat they have to find, is in Russian water, so they need to get there, before the Russians figure it out as well.
Yes, and they don't want the Russians
interests.
taking whatever's in there.
So, and then you've got Moira. I pronounce that right?
Yeah, Moira Lamb.
Moira Lamb, who's
Or Mariah. Actually, it's Mariah.
It's Mariah.
Yeah.
Mariah Lamb, who's the marine biologist that is hired to come on board, and she brings along one of her work buddies, a guy named Bill, who's a pretty big dude as well. And more, she's, once again, think movie. She's an attractive black woman, so you can kind of see you've got the leading man, is the captain. You've got the attractive black woman. Could it be a love interest? You'll just have to read it. And then, you've got his two brothers, which are his crew. I mean, he has more of a crew. I think there's a couple more guys, ancillary guys, but basically it's, these three brothers.
They're the main
ones. And, one of the brothers is, the short hair brother with glasses is the smart alecky type guy.
Yep.
And then as the other brother's a little bit taller, leaner, longer hair. They're both kind of jokesters compared to the captain.
Yeah, they wind up having to go ashore, and they take the smaller boat over, and they get aboard, and they're looking to try and figure out what happened. And they're like, well, it's got to be automated. Well, the interesting thing is it winds up they're not alone. There's survivors.
They come across somebody from the crew. And that's how the first issue ends. They come across somebody from the crew. Just leave it at that. That just looks dead.
Yeah.
Looks gross. Not like Walking Dead zombie gross. Just more, it's more in the coloring that is done. Their color, he's colored real dusty pale. Basically, like all the color's drained out of him. But he's not like withering away like somebody should be, or aged like they would be from 40 years gone by.
Yeah, and the art on it's again just really well done on everything that they do in here. So it looks pretty interesting. It's a washed color palette. Which, kind of lends to the realism. It's not super bright like we usually see in the superhero stuff.
Dave Stewart.
Yeah.
If you don't know that name, he's top. I mean, this whole team is grade A, top notch in regards to, who was put on this book for the creative team.
The underwater scenes and stuff with the bubbles, the attention to detail. I mean, it's just solid. And, the story keeps going on aboard. You start realizing that they wind up finding survivors. We won't get into a lot of detail, but there's some interesting conversations that they wind up having with these survivors. And then all of a sudden,
hell breaks loose. And just getting back to Stuart's art, too. Stuart, because I followed his career, he's definitely somebody whose art I love and look up to. And, if there's anything that I can pull from what he does, I try, tips and tricks and stuff. But he's done styles that, like, he's mostly a realistic artist, but he's also worked very open, where he doesn't put a lot of shadows and a lot of blacks into his work. But this, because it's supposed to be a horror book, he's loading up with the shadows, with the amount of blacks that he's putting on a page to just really give it that dark feel. And, the coloring just complements it. Casting wise, Paul Giamatti was the simple one out of the gate for the corporate guy, like we said. Now, we talked about it before we started recording.
Because what we did was we were like, what we kept talking about each week when we got the issue, it was like, this literally plays like a movie. Yeah. I mean, it's written like it could be. It's like a script and it's not too often you see a comic book that's written that could just work right itself into a
limited
movie
series.
Right.
I could, I don't, it's weird though, because I always default to this would make a great movie, but I could see it as, a 13 episode miniseries as well, so you don't have to try and cram everything into 2 hours.
Yeah, depending on how they did it. I think they could get 6 to 8 hours and turn that into something.
Well, yeah. I mean, I
big.
think it's 6 issues. Each issue could easily be an hour.
Yeah.
And it almost might work better because it was a serialized 6-issue miniseries. Every issue ended with a cliffhanger, which would make for a 6-hour,
right.
TV miniseries. I mean, you could throw all these cliffhangers that are at the end of every issue could easily be inserted into a 2-hour movie, because it would basically be that gasp scene that you see in a movie, and then it cuts to something else.
Right, and the interesting thing, this comic series, the reason why we like it is nothing is always quite as it seems. There's always little twists and turns, and at each end of the comic book, for the most part, it's like, oh, wow, did that just happen? That's neat. Oh, I can't wait for the next issue. Again, that translates into what you would say is a miniseries. All right, this episode breaks. It's a cliffhanger. It leaves you coming back for more. It's written to the point where I can't wait. That's why we're like, when's the next issue coming out? When's the next issue coming out?
I think what you also get, too, is there's the main bad guy, if you want to say bad guy, which is, has to deal with the crew. I mean, I don't think that's a spoiler of any means. This is a horror book. The setup is the salvage crew's hired to go to this ship that's been missing for 40 years, that there's finally a distress signal. So I think it's a safe bet that whatever they find, that's the bad part. But the Paul Giamatti guy, the corporate stooge, he, when he comes in, you can tell he has an ulterior motive, but then he just becomes more slimy. You know what I mean? As the 6 issues go on, he just becomes that slimy character that you're like, man, you really are an a-hole, aren't you? You're just taking this turn. Like, I didn't think you could get any worse. Nope, you can.
Yep. And the great thing
is, an interesting character.
Paul Giamatti would be perfect for.
Oh, he'd be perfect.
He would be just totally perfect for this role.
Well, I haven't actually. It's funny, so I could totally be wrong on that. He's, the show Billions. Isn't he on Billions? Have you heard of that show?
Don't watch it.
I haven't watched it either, and I'm pretty sure that's. I'm remembering correctly that Paul Giamatti's in a show called Billions, and from the clips I've seen, it's kind of like that character. Anyhow, so he'd be good. So my choice for casting the lead, the Captain Carpenter, is David Harbour, the guy that played Hellboy recently, from the police sheriff from Stranger Things, and soon to be what's his name there, Red in Black Widow. Not Red Menace. Why?
Oh, you're thinking Stranger Things.
No. He's in Black Widow.
Yeah, you the
David Harbour.
Yes.
Yeah. What's the bad guy? What's the name? And it's Red something.
Red Guardian.
Red Guardian. Yes, he plays Red Guardian in Black Widow. So I think David Harbour, and I think part of it's because I've seen him with the beard. He is a big guy. He does tower over people. So that's who I thought of.
See, and I had a different thought. So we were kind of joking, and we're like, "Well, this is like a movie. Who would we cast?" And if budget's not an issue, and we could just pick anybody out, I went with Vince Vaughn. Now, Vince Vaughn's usually clean shaven, so granted, but he can put on a beard. And he's huge, he's strong, and he's got that commanding kind of presence. But the way he talks, and just his mannerisms, I was like, I could see Vince Vaughn being able to play this role kind of as a Vince Vaughn character. Yeah, and I would like it, but I also wouldn't disagree with yours. I think he would also be an interesting choice.
They're probably about the same height. Vince might actually be a little taller.
I think Vince is like 6'6".
Vince is a tall dude.
Yeah.
David Harbour, though, now I got to Google it and see. Because I think he's got to be over 6 feet tall. I mean, the guy played Hellboy. Yeah, he's 6'3".
Yep.
So, yeah, they both definitely have the height for it. So, either one of those guys for...
then Clark's there is the short brother.
Clark's the shorter brother with the glasses and the short hair.
Right.
And I think Tom Holland, actually. I don't know how old he's supposed to be in the book. He's definitely younger. I think Tom's probably old enough.
He could pass.
I think, I'd say mid-20s.
He's the jokester of the three brothers.
Yeah, he's kind of a jokey one.
I took a different approach. I kind of went with, Paul Rudd. Again, we don't know the age and stuff.
Right.
But he's got that dry kind of sense of humor, and I could see Paul Rudd being a pretty good fit for him. So in each of these, so they make references to Jaws and stuff like that, and then they're like, well, it's kind of like Jaws, where Captain Carpenter's would be Quint from there, and Clark would be the Brody, so he would be the sheriff from the original Jaws. Right. I just think it's more of the sheriff with the sense of humor, the Paul Rudd kind of character. The third brother is long-haired. He's got long hair, and he's the one that they say would be like Hooper. Yeah. The little geologist. So you had an interesting take on Hooper, didn't you?
Oh, for casting for him?
Yeah.
Oh, what's that dude's name again from, we were just talking about him, the Umbrella Academy.
Yeah, so Robert Sheehan is who I kind of figured. Yeah. Wait, I didn't know if you had a different guy or not.
Oh, no, I think Robert Sheehan's a good guy. Just, once again, it's, I don't know, he has kind of the build. He's got the longer hair from this last season of Umbrella Academy. The hairstyle worked good.
Yeah, the language when he talks and stuff, I could kind of picture it. I actually thought it would be a really good fit. So we got the Hooper and Quentin Brody all covered from Jaws. So then the final one would be
the marine biologist.
Mariah Lamb. She's the marine biologist. And the way they draw her, I think she's a little bit younger in the book. But the girl, the way she talks, the way they drew her and everything, I thought of Gabrielle Union immediately, and from like Bring It Up, a whole bunch of stuff. But
no, that's a good one.
She looks and sounds like it. She could play the part. The diving under the water and the scuba scenes and stuff like that. Don't know if she really swims in real life, but I think she would be a perfect fit for it.
Okay, so for me, I think a good fit, and it's because I've seen him with that hairstyle. Well, Gabrielle Union kind of has had that hairstyle too that Stuart drew in the book. But I was actually thinking, God, I hope I don't mess her first name up, Taraji P. Henson. She was most recently in, it was on Fox. Empire. She's from Empire. She was in the movie Hidden Figures.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Taraji P. Henson. I hope I didn't mess up the first name too bad. I thought she'd be perfect for it as well.
Yeah.
She'd be great casting for it as well.
But all in all, it's a good book. We just don't want to give too much away because it's worth reading. It's a thriller. It's a horror movie. It's suspenseful. It was well written.
And see, that's the thing. It could be taken, depending on how it was adapted for screen. You could see it as a thriller, or you could see it as a straight up horror movie. That's the one thing, like, when I read it, I didn't really get the vibe that it was, my first vibe was more thriller. Because when I think horror, I think gore and guts and scary stuff. And there's definitely visuals in this that could go that way. Well, and maybe it's because it's in a comic. I think it's also a bit of sci-fi. I mean, the way that they did it. I mean, it winds up being a cross-platform, cross-generational. It's interesting. Like I said, it's captivating. I would recommend this. So we're going to give it our comic grades here. But I would recommend it. Like I said, it's not something we would normally bring up and talk about. But it was just a unique, interesting, where after the first few issues, I had to read the rest of it. I mean, it was just that was one of the things is during this time of shutdown and everything. I mean, things are opening up now, but back when I first got this, I didn't even know it was out because, comic shops were closed. And when I first read about it coming out, I think it was towards the end of last year when they announced Joe Hill's line at DC. And I remember reading about it going, I got to keep that on my radar. But then once all this stuff started happening in the springtime, honestly, it kind of fell off my radar. And then when shops opened again a couple months ago, 6-8 weeks ago, whenever it was, I remember walking into the shop seeing issue 4 and going, whoa, wait a second, this is out. Issue 4, what the hell? So I literally picked up 1 through 4 that day. And that's when, I came home and I read them. So it was cool because I didn't have to wait a month after issue 1. I mean, I got to the end of issue 1 and I was like, great cliffhanger. 30 days? I don't think so. Boom. Issue 2 right there. Another great cliffhanger. Issue 3, issue 4. And then it sucked because I was like, damn it. 2 issues left and I got to wait. And that's when, I called up Dennis and was like, man, you've got to read this. And I let him borrow them.
We debated talking about it right after we finished reading the issues, and we just decided, you know what, let's wait to see how it wraps up, particularly because we didn't know what kind of delay or anything with COVID's going on with, putting out episodes and stuff. So let's just wait till it wraps up so we can talk about the whole thing. Glad we did. I would give it on the comic scale, I would give it an 8.5. It was just a solid read all the way through. The characters were believable. It was interesting. It's just not my typical genre, but I hope they do something very much like this in with the same quality.
See, that's funny because I was actually, I am going to give it a 9.2.
Oh.
Yeah, man, I'm going right up the top. Almost perfect. I mean, gotta figure 10.0 is a perfect comic. I have yet to come across a perfect comic. But 9.2, I mean, it is a unicorn. 9.2, I thought the writing was great. I thought, Stuart's artwork was, once again, top-notch. I haven't seen him do a bad job. And it makes me want to, hope that there's some type of, I don't know if there'd be a sequel to it. Well, there could be a sequel.
There could be.
This was the other thing, actually, so there could be a sequel. I will say this. They even set up for an after-credit scene, which I was I thought was awesome, because you get to the end and no spoilers at all about how the story ends, except for the fact that you get to the end, and just like in a movie, there's the big, third act, there's the big climax. Everything gets resolved in a really good, cool way, really big way. And then, of course, there's the, after the climax, there's like a little bit of resolution, what's happening now, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, that was a satisfying read. But then you turn the page, and when you turn the page, that's the after credit scene, and you're like, yes!
Yep, it was good.
Awesome! And yes, there can be a sequel, so I really hope there is one, because it was awesome.
Now, it was a short print run, so it's going to be difficult. You can run if you want to run out and pick them up, ask your local comic book shops. But it looks like it's coming out in a trade paperback, so you should be able to...
Hardcover in November.
Yep, should be getting it real soon. So it would be a definite worth for a pickup.
And here's the funny thing. In November, I can almost guarantee I'll get the hardcover because I like having stuff collected like that. And I'm hoping, like most things are, there's just a few bonus things in the back of like Stuart's character sketches, maybe a little bit of the script. You put that stuff in it, you've got my money twice, because that's how I am. I've bought other trades where literally it's just the collection with nothing else in the back. I'm a little bummed, but I still buy it because I can put it on my bookshelf.
Yep. Well, so Andy got me into this, so he got me into Plunge.
So
and
fair play.
It was my turn for a little tit for tat. So I hopped in, so again, with COVID kind of keeping us in, I like to work out to a movie in the morning. And lo and behold, usually I just go onto Netflix or Prime or something like that and find something to watch. Well, I wound up, for whatever reason, YouTube popped up. And yes, YouTube does have movies. I usually don't ever watch them. But it wound up popping up a movie that just kind of piqued my interest, not something I had seen. It was called The Beyond. And I was like, it's sci-fi. I like sci-fi. So I says, I'm willing to give it a shot. If it's terrible, I'll turn it off halfway, after I'm off the treadmill. So I'm sitting there watching it. And the one thing that I noticed right away is you don't know any of the characters. A lot of British actors. But I didn't recognize, anybody super famous. The special effects were good, and the story was just intriguing. So I started watching, and I'm like, wow, I'm really kind of liking where this is going. And the tale, I finish it up, and I call up Andy, and I like the movie. And I said, hey, have you ever heard of The Beyond? And he's like, no. Nope. And I'm like, do you like, and this is the preface that we're still going to talk about it, but it's not a high action sci-fi movie.
This is what it's good that he didn't word it like this, because I probably would have been out. But that's how he worded it. But if he would have said, do you like slow sci-fi that really doesn't have a lot of action but is more talking, probably would have bailed right then.
It is an intelligent sci-fi, and that's actually how I worded it.
It is, and that intrigued me.
You got to think through this, and you've got to follow it. And he goes, yeah, I do. And I'm like, all right. Because most of the sci-fi today is shoot, 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 laser, 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 shields, flip, robots taking over, whatever. This is none of that, but it is incredibly well instructed. So I'm like, you need to watch this so we can talk about this, because I'm willing to bet there's quite a bit of the audience out there that has never heard of this.
So I watched it, and it does start off a little slow. And it is also shot from the standpoint of like a documentary where there's like a film crew following around a certain scientist.
Yep.
And the basic gist is the movie starts out, and there's an astronaut doing a spacewalk on the ISS, and there's like something in space.
An anomaly.
An anomaly in space. And the anomaly's getting closer and closer. And it's big. It's this big cloud energy looking thing.
Like Galactus from the Fantastic Four.
Exactly. From that. Silver Surfer looked great in that movie. Galactus, not so much. So there's this big anomaly, radiation, who knows what it is thing coming towards the space station, and the astronaut doing a spacewalk can't get inside in time, so he's like, he's got his tether, and I think that breaks, and now he's holding on for dear life, and it's so bright he can't see, and then once the anomaly passes, he's gone, right?
Yep.
He's gone.
He just disappears.
And then, is that when, and so this one, we won't spoil a ton, but we want to tell you about it. So, get you to watch it. Because I think it's worth a watch. It's a short movie. There's these, like, black spherical clouds.
Call them amorphous spheres that
just keep moving, that come down
into the Earth's
atmosphere and kind of hover above cities worldwide. I mean, I don't know how many there are, but they're spread out.
They never give a number, but
they don't give a number, but they're spread out across the globe.
Right.
And they're these huge, like if you're on Earth just looking up into the sky, it's this huge black cloud, but it's in the shape of a sphere. So it's not like regular clouds that have no shape. It's definitely a spherical shape. And it's huge. I mean, I don't know how big to describe it. They're just huge, floating there.
Yep, and they show up on Earth, and what was interesting is in space, they
no
see
one can
this.
hear you scream.
Yes, unless you turn on your microphone.
That's right.
And what was interesting is they wind up sending probes through it, and the probes just disappear the moment they hit the event horizon. And
into the cloud thing.
Into the cloud thing. Well, then they kind of realize it's a wormhole because it transmits right up into the second where it enters the event horizon. And one of the pictures, which is really cool, it's like in one frame you can see a spherical object through it. So they start dealing into actual science of what wormholes are,
right? Which is intriguing,
which is really cool. And then you see it, and they realize that is a picture of another planet.
Right.
So they're thinking there is a planet on the other side of the wormhole. So they're explaining how wormholes, work and how they go from one spot to another across great distances. But they understand right away that the human body cannot survive the gravitational effects that you would need to go through for a wormhole. And obviously the ships aren't like Star Trek where they have shields and stuff. It's basically current day.
It's current day. So even though the technology that we're about to get into that they use to get a human type through the wormhole, there is not anywhere near development. It's not so far out there where you're like, well, that can never be done. Like, let's build a starship and have it, There's none of that. I will say, I thought one thing that made me think of Avengers is when they were talking about the wormhole and the woman basically said, well, if there's an entrance, there has to be an exit, to something else. And I thought of Avengers when Hawkeye was talking to Nick Fury about the doorway in Avengers 1 saying, well, it's like a door. And Nick Fury's like, yeah, and he goes, well, if it opens...
It's got to open on the other side.
It's got to open on the other side, too, right? And Nick's like, oh, shit. And that's when Loki comes to town. So anyhow, it made me think of that. So what their plan is, basically, they've developed the technology... And it wasn't developed just for this. It was something they were already working on.
Well, it was... Okay, so this takes place in Britain. And it's the United States Air Force, their division, that winds up... They have this secret technology that they had been developing where they call it Human 2.0s, where they have these combat suit bodies that are basically impervious to just about everything. But they have to take the human brain and mesh it and put it inside of basically a cyborg body. So it's kind of like RoboCop if you kind of think of it, from that perspective. And it's the U.S. Air Force is dead. They've just never successfully done it. They haven't tested it. They've got bodies made, but they've never attempted this fusion.
Because what they have to do is you have to get the volunteer that's like, this is a one-way trip. Because basically, we're killing you, and before your brain dies, we're going to harvest your brain and then hook it up inside of this skeleton, mechanical body.
Right.
And then...
It could be a one-way mission. I mean, they make it clear. This is probably a one-way mission through a wormhole, so this is it. I mean, and even if it weren't, and you could come back.
Yeah, because what my interpretation when they said it's one way was... Even if you come back, we're not able to take your brain and put it back.
Correct.
You're basically
See, and I took it as it's one way in every conceivable aspect.
Yeah, I didn't really think of it that way.
There's no coming back from this.
Which I thought, like, who the F would volunteer for this?
Yes.
I mean, because they go through and they show, snippets of like 4 or 5 volunteers in the interview process. And, they're interviewing, people that have different backgrounds and stuff. Because they almost want to put a team together.
The one guy who was picked first, it was great. He was in a wheelchair,
right,
and he's a paraplegic. And he's incredibly smart, intuitive, good in every way. He just didn't have the use of his legs.
Right.
Well, what perfect way to do it than to put him in this, and he wound up being the first choice. He was a great choice.
And the other thing they were doing too is, and this made sense just from a filming standpoint, is they were like, and what we're going to do is we're going to map your face and then make a organic looking real face for this body that we're putting your brain into. So when you go through the wormhole, whatever's on the other side, if there's intelligent life, won't be like scared back by a robot, and they'll actually see a face inside a helmet.
Yes.
And it will be your face. So then at least if, the person comes, or the person, whatever, comes back through the wormhole, and it's a success, I guess it's like, well, I'm in a robot body, but look at my face. This is me.
Well, not only that, but when you wake up, you have no idea how are you going to see through, basically robotic eyes.
Right.
And then at least when you wake up and see, you can see your
if you look
face.
in a mirror.
And it doesn't scare the hell out of you because you're not
going to wake up and see anything. I can't see my face right now, Dennis. You know that, right?
In a mirror.
Right, in a mirror. But the point is, when you wake up in the morning, you're not waking up, and there's a mirror right in front of you. Maybe there's a mirror above your bed. I don't know. I don't know what you guys do. Yeah. Maybe there is. I'm just saying, in my house, the first thing I see when I wake up is not my face. Thank God.
Yep, I usually don't either until I go into the restroom.
Lucky.
Yes.
Luckiest woman in the world. She wakes up, and there it is.
And screams every morning.
Screams every morning. What did I do? What did I do?
Yes.
This is a little spoiler filled. I don't know. Should we say about first?
Here's the interesting thing.
How deep do we want to spoil
the spheres are... The spheres, they think, are bad. They think that they're planning on harming the Earth. So time is of the essence to get through. They don't really know, but our first reaction is always, if we don't understand it, it's bad. Right. So they're in a rush, and and they wind up. The ship winds up making it. It's a cool launch scene. So again, this is a low budget film.
Yeah.
But what they use their special effects for, like the launching sequence, the ISS, what you saw of it, all the robotic stuff, it's very well done.
For a low budget film, it is. I mean, you nailed it. The special effects, even the first scene in space with the astronaut and the, light show in space he sees, it looks real. I mean, they really did it. They did a great job.
It's reminiscent to me of 2001: A Space Odyssey. So again, it feels like a little bit of different movies from the genre, because the outer space, there's no noise, when you see this stuff. But instead of the monolith, you've got these weird things out in space that nobody knows what they are. And you've got RoboCop, because you've got the robots, the cyborg bodies that they have to get fused into. But the cool thing about when they determine who it is, they still have to go through the human process, because the volunteer has a family, has a daughter. What are the emotional impacts? What's going to happen? Right. How are you going to do it? They go through and explore all of this.
Which was good. It added that nice human... It would have been really odd if they just got these volunteers and were just like, oh, great, you're volunteered and awesome. But no, you're right. They went through, they said, okay, this is the story we're going to tell your family. There was an accident. You died. It'll be closed casket. They explain how they were going to work all the story out with any relatives and stuff really well. There's 2 people they do the procedure with. I think that's as far as we'll say for that, because we don't want to spoil anything.
Yep.
without getting into the ending, because that would spoil stuff too, I thought it was satisfying. So Dennis did a hands off on the Cell job, because if you would have done it like me, which is, it's a slow sci-fi movie with no action, I would have been out. But you said it was an intelligent sci-fi movie with limited action, and I can buy into that. So I'm glad I watched it. I would recommend it. I mean,
I would too, and we don't want to spoil it, even though it's an older movie, because I bet it's an older movie, a couple years old. Yeah. But I don't think many people have heard of it or seen it, and I'm usually down with all the sci-fi stuff.
But it's not American made.
Exactly.
That's why. It's, it wasn't a theatrical release. It's not an American-made movie. I can't even pronounce. Well, I can, but I would not do.
It's Hasraf Dalal,
but it was. See, I would have screwed that up.
It was his first feature film, because I actually had to look that up afterwards. I'm like, oh, and they based it off of a 2014 short film known as Project Kronos, which isn't something I had seen. I've heard about it, and I went, oh. Okay, but I've actually never watched that, so that makes me kind of want to grab some time here and go find Project Kronos and now watch that.
I thought the cool thing, too, was, one of the things I asked Dennis was, any actors in it I would know? And he's like, nope. And there literally wasn't, which was cool, because, as I said before, what I miss from being a kid is, as a kid, I could go see a movie, like, say, Risky Business, and I had no idea who Tom Cruise was. I mean, not many people did at that time, but the point is, I didn't think to myself, oh, it's another Tom Cruise movie, or whatever. Whereas, I go to a movie now, and Tom Cruise is in it, and, the suspension of disbelief is just gone, because I know who Tom Cruise is. I know who Brad Pitt is. I know who these actors are. This movie had nobody in it I've ever heard of, because it's not an American movie, and I loved it because they all did such a great job. I believed every single one. It wasn't a movie that was so schlocky that you're like, I don't know any of these actors, and they all suck, because I can tell they're acting.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Even the small roles.
Right, and that's just it. And the acting was good, the story was believable, and it was something that, if that happened today, what would we do? Could we do this? And the whole thing was very, very believable. So it was enjoyable. I say we rate this one. I'm on the comic book scale. I'm going to give this a 7.5 because it is good, and it was so much better than my expectations. It was intelligent. It was an enjoyable film. We'll just say, anytime there's first contact potentially involved, it's always interesting because there's been a lot of films with it. This handled it in a very, I don't want to say completely unique way, but a very smart way they handled it. It was enjoyable through. All the actors and actresses were great. What special effects they had on it were very well done. So, hands off for a good first performance.
It's funny. I laughed when you said 7.5 because my first gut says 7.0.
Okay.
So we're not far off. I agree with everything you said. I will say it does start a little slow. I mean, which is kind of, weird because...
Not fortitude slow.
Not fortitude slow, no. Because fortitude... If you look at fortitude... Okay. If you look at fortitude as 13 hours, and you look at the percentage of slowness... I think the percentage of slowness in this hour and a half is the same.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So that's what I'll say to that. You can't compare 13 hours to an hour and 40 minutes or however long it was. I don't think it was over 2 hours.
I think it was about an hour and a half. It was right around an hour and a half. It was concise.
So if you could take another movie, here you go. How slow would you compare this movie to... Arkansas, the Vince Vaughn one.
Oh. Huh.
Exactly. See, now those are about the same runtime and everything. Anyhow, while you're thinking about that, I give it a 7. It started off punchy with the spacewalk and what happens to the astronaut in space. So that did pull you in, but then it slowed it down a little bit too much for me to where they got to with what they had to do and were going about. But once it did, it moved, and it was, like Dennis said, it's an intelligent sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
So it does, you think about stuff. And I like movies like that. So
the only thing that I picked up on there that I didn't agree with, like I said, most of it was completely believable. But there was one, I'll call it a goof.
What?
And he says it means you didn't maybe catch what I was thinking. So they strip all the oxygen out of the ship because they're like, well there's no humans.
Right, there's no
because
humans.
the humans, they're human 2.0s. They're metal. Exactly.
Right.
And I was like, but the human brains, and they're still flesh, but it's still the human brain that's in there no matter what. The human
flesh, so that doesn't matter.
The human brain,
the brain
still
needs oxygen.
requires oxygen, and there was not on there even with it being in there.
And they don't work that into the suit somehow with the gel.
But they didn't address it. They didn't address it. So anyway, I don't know if it was a goof or something they could have explained more, but that's my one little thing. So I don't want it to detract from the movie. But anyway, cool. So Andy gives it a 7, and I give it a 7.5. We just think it would be something different. For those of you who like that kind of sci-fi.
So it's an hour and a half, give you something to do on a treadmill, exercise bike, Saturday night, Friday night, you're looking for something. That's the thing I like about hour and a half movies, is it can be, you guys will laugh, it can be 9 o'clock at night and I can put it in and go, oh sweet, I'll still go to bed by 10:30.
Oh, you're old.
I go to bed early. That's all I'm saying. But seriously, like, if you recommend a movie to me and it's 2 hours long, I won't start it at 9 o'clock on a weeknight. I won't do it because I'm like, oh, God, that means I'm not going to bed till 11? That's late. I can't do that. I got to save that movie for Friday or Saturday night when it's not a school night.
Well, and so one of the things we gave you today isn't normal. We gave you a comic book that we would probably normally not talk about, and a movie that we probably wouldn't have normally watched, and both wound up being very successful in our minds. So we hope you gave you something a little different to look forward to.
There you go. Well, thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys next week. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Until next week, grab your 3D glasses.
Get your favorite comic books, roll them up, and put them in your back pocket the way you should treat comics.
Throw your pigskin up on the mantle. This is Dennis.
This is Andy. Later, friends.